Confederate heritage is inextricably intertwined with Confederate history. On April 4th, 1861, the Virginia Convention voted down a secession resolution by a 2-to-1 majority. Virginia was trying to craft a compromise that would bring the seceded states back into the Union. On April 5th, the federal government launched an expedition to Charleston. On April 12th, Confederate forces in Charleston Harbor fired on Fort Sumter. On April 15th, President Lincoln called for troops to invade South Carolina and the others and overthrow the elected governments of those states. Such a policy was violent, anti-democratic, and unconstitutional. The Constitution is a limited delegation of enumerated powers from the peoples of the several states to the federal government. The power of the federal government to eject an elected state government and replace it with a military government was not one of those delegated powers. One would look in vain in the Constitution for such a power. The federal government, however, in April 1861, claimed that power. Virginia, to her credit, refused to support such an effort. Governor John Letcher said, quote, "The militia of Virginia will not be furnished to the powers at Washington for any such use or purpose as they have in view. Your object is to subjugate the southern states, and a requisition made upon me for such an object, in my judgment, not within the purview of the Constitution or the Act of 1795, will not be complied with. You have chosen to inaugurate civil war, and having done so, we will meet it in a spirit as determined as the administration has exhibited toward the South." Close quote. Further, the people of Virginia refused to remain in a union in which such a violent, anti-democratic, unconstitutional policy was even possible. So they left the Union as well. On April 17, 1861, the Convention of the People of Virginia voted to leave the Union by a 2-to-1 margin. Then, the people of Virginia held a referendum, and the people voted directly to leave the Union by a vote of 126,000 to 20,000. Reverend Francis McFarland of Riverheads, a Northern man by birth, wrote, quote, "I voted to sustain the action of the convention as revolution, for it is such. This is the most painful vote I ever gave. The course of the administration making actual war upon the South to compel them to remain in the Union or return to it seemed to leave me no alternative. I mourn in bitterness over the state of things, but Virginia did all she could for peace." The people of the Commonwealth asked young men to defend her. On April 17th, 1861, Governor Letcher, quote, "ordered all armed volunteer regiments or companies within this state forthwith to hold themselves in readiness for immediate orders, and upon the reception of this proclamation, to report to the Adjutant General of the state their organization and numbers," close quote. Later, in 1862, Virginia demanded young men defend the Commonwealth. In following this course, Virginia acted as a free people should. They refused to support and condone the wrong. They fought to protect the right, even though they lost, and at terrible cost. Thus, Confederate heritage stands for self-government, refusing to commit wrong even when the government demands it. It stands for answering the call of the people for protection, for duty, for self-sacrifice, for courage. These are still worthy ideals. Every Confederate monument in every courthouse lawn is placed to commemorate these men and their service. At the courthouse in Charles City County, the monument is dedicated to the, open quote, "defenders of constitutional liberty and the right of self-government," close quote. Halifax County's monument is dedicated to open quote, the Confederate soldiers who fought for constitutional liberty. The Clark County Monument was dedicated to the Confederate soldiers, quote, who gave their lives in defense of the rights of the states and of constitutional government, close quote. Those who say, yeah, right, the right to own slaves, are either badly misinformed or they know better, but they're saying something they know to be untrue. In the bleak winter of 1864-65, Confederate soldiers of Wharton's division at Fishersville declared, quote, in the beginning of this revolution, we volunteered in response to the first call of our country to fight for the sovereign right of self-government, and that, after 4 years of terrible war with the savage foe who seeks our subjugation, we are still firm in our determination to achieve our independence or to perish nobly, struggling for it. It would seem that there was lost causing going on even during the war. A monument is an agreement between the past, the present, and the future. People today commemorate the people of the past to inspire people of the future. At the dedication of the Lee statue in New Orleans, which has since been removed, the orator of the day, Charles Fenner, asked his audience to imagine, open quote, a crisis in the future of the Republic when virtue might have lost her seat in the hearts of the people, when degrading greed of money-getting might have undermined the nobler aspirations of their souls, when luxury and effeminacy might have emasculated the rugged courage and endurance upon which the safety of states depends, when corruption might thrive and liberty might languish, when pelf might stand above patriotism, self above country, mammon before God. In such an hour, let some inspired orator, alive to the perils of his country, summon the people to gather round this monument, and pointing to that noble figure, let him recount his story, and if anything can arouse a noble shame and awaken dormant virtue, that may do it. At the dedication of the Lee statue in Richmond, which has also since been removed, Colonel Archer Anderson said, quote, let this monument teach to generations yet unborn these lessons of his life. Let it stand for patriotic hope and cheer if a day of national gloom and disaster shall ever dawn upon our country. Speaking in Thornrow Cemetery in Stanton, Virginia in 1879, Captain James Baumgartner spoke about Confederate monuments. A nation's monuments, he said, are the brief epitome of its history. They record at once the annals of the dead and the character and faith of the living. A brave, noble, patriotic, devoted, and wise people perpetuate in bronze and marble the memories of its heroes, patriots, saints, martyrs, and sages. Hence the traveler in a strange land examines the cemetery with as much interest as the living city, for he sees there at one view all of a country's past and all of its present. If he learns that the dead brave are forgotten, he knows that the living are brave no longer. If he sees that the patriotic, the virtuous, and saintly of the past are not honored, he knows that patriotism, virtue, and faith have sought another clime. But where the graves of heroes are kept green, and where the foot of the pilgrim still seeks the shrine of the martyr, he knows that courage, truth, faith, and honor still abide in the hearts of the living. The Confederate soldier needs no eulogy. His devotion and deeds will speak for themselves in history. He was tried by every test that measures the courage, endurance, faith, and devotion of man, and was never found wanting. Their record is made up, and in it is written the verdict that they were worthy of the cause for which they died. Some pages are yet to be added to our record, and let us endeavor so to fill them as to secure for ourselves the verdict that we were worth the offering of such lives. And when we remove Confederate monuments today, what are we saying? Young men answered the call of the people of Virginia to defend them. 150 years later, their great-grandsons and great-granddaughters declare them fools and traitors for having answered the call of the people of Virginia and are ashamed of the conduct of their great-grandfathers. And what will happen in the future if Virginia finds herself in another crisis where she needs the young people of the Commonwealth to defend her? Will the young man at that day say, I will not answer that call, because if I do defend Virginia and possibly die in her defense, then future generations will redefine what I was fighting for and call me a traitor? No. No, Virginia can defend herself. I won't do it. Will the members of the mobs now screeching for the removal of Confederate monuments rise up and defend Virginia in her hour of need? The ideals of courage, self-sacrifice, and honor are as foreign to them as an inscrutable ancient foreign language. However, as long as we honor the selfless sacrifice of Confederate soldiers, we can inspire future generations to follow their example and defend our homes.